An optional but very useful feature to use in React is default properties. When we set up defaults, we can use the default values if another value is not provided. That way, we don't have a UI that looks like this. A bunch of categories not filled up with numbers, and then a weird percentage here, not a number. So let's go ahead and do this in the 3 different component styles. So here in your components folder, I've created a ski_day_count create class, ES6, and then we have our existing file, our stateless functional component. So in the create class file, we're going to add default props the create class way. And the place we're going to add those is here on line 8. So we're going to add a method called getDefaultProps. And getDefaultProps is going to return an object. And this object is going to have all of our different properties listed. So total, we'll say 50, powder, let's say 50 again. We will say backcountry is 15, and goal 100. So now if we go to our index.js file, we're just rendering our ski day count. I have our ski day list commented out here at the bottom. So our ski day count file, if we look for the create class version of this, we can check it out in the browser and see that all of our values are being provided from the defaults. Pretty cool. Let's switch over to our ES6 file. And the way that we handled this is slightly different. So instead of adding a method to our class, we're actually going to add this to the class instance. So the name of our class here on line 46 is ski_day_count. And we're going to use default props. And we're going to set this equal to that same object. So we're going to say total is 50, powder we'll say is 10, backcountry is 15, and then our goal, let's say, is 75. So we've made a slight adjustment to a few of these fields, and we also need to render the correct component. So we're going to render ski_day_count ES6. So let's take a look at this now, and we have our calculation happening correctly. We see that our days are being listed appropriately also. Let's handle this now the stateless way. Now, the good news is we can use the same syntax if we'd like to as ES6. So I'm just going to copy and paste this over to our ski_day_count file. And we're going to paste that there at the bottom. Let's also adjust our index file now. So we're not going to use -ES6. We'll just use the straight up file. Now, if we take a look at this in the browser, we should see that this is working correctly. But I want to give you one other alternative here. So this is a very useful way of handling this. It's kind of the ES6 class way, but you can also set this up with your properties as default properties. So just like you can set up defaults in functions now with ES6, you can do the same thing here in your component. So here on line 14, and I'm going to break this up on a couple different lines so that we can actually see what's going on here. I'm going to set our total to be, let's say 70. We'll set our powder days to 20. We'll set our backcountry days to 10. And we'll set our goal at 100. So we can set these up directly as defaults when we're sending them as arguments to this function. And I'm going to get rid of our default props at the bottom just so that we can make sure that everything's rendering correctly. So back to our index file, we're rendering the right thing. So if we check this out in the browser, we see that it's working. So these are all of the different ways that we can handle default properties. But while this is not a requirement, I would always encourage you to use this because default properties allows us to provide values when they are not supplied.